The room was designed to erase humanity. It was a perfect cube of soundproofed glass and brushed steel, suspended within a larger, darker chamber at the heart of the prism, the UK's most secretive intelligence nexus. Inside the cube, under the sterile glare of LED panels, sat two men. The first was the asset, a gaunt figure with hollowed-out eyes that held the ghosts of a dozen collapsed regimes. He hadn't said a word in 72 hours. The second was Agent Thorne, a man carved from the same sharp, modern material as the room itself. His suit was impeccable, his jaw was tight with impatience, and his disdain for the situation was a palpable force. For 3 days, Thorne and his partner, the younger, perpetually nervous Agent Davies, had thrown everything at the asset. Every psychological trick, every threat, every offer of clemency. The result was a profound, unnerving silence. The man was a ghost, a key to a lock they couldn't even find. High-tech linguistic analysis software had failed, cycling through thousands of known languages and dialects, returning only a single infuriating result: unidentified. It was this failure that led to her. When the door to the outer chamber hissed open, Thorne didn't even look up from his tablet. Davies, however, did, his eyes widening slightly. He nudged Thorne. "Sir, they sent the archivist." Thorne's head snapped up. Standing in the doorway, flanked by a guard who looked profoundly bored, was a woman who seemed to be the architectural opposite of the prism. Alara Vance was in her late 50s, with strands of silver woven through her dark, simply tied hair. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a plain blouse and sensible shoes that made no sound on the polished concrete floor. She carried no tablet, no high-tech gear, only a slim, leather-bound notebook and a fountain pen. She looked like a librarian who had taken a wrong turn and ended up in a place of terrible secrets. "You've got to be kidding me," Thorne muttered, loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. He strode to the edge of the glass cube, his reflection a sharp-edged phantom. He pressed the intercom button. "What is this control?" "I asked for a specialist, not a substitute teacher." A disembodied voice, flat and neutral, crackled back. "All digital and human assets have failed to identify the subject's language, Thorne. Alara Vance is our last resort. She's a level 4 linguistic archivist. Her clearance is sufficient." "Sufficient for what? Dusting off scrolls?" Thorne scoffed, turning his back to her and addressing Davies. "Waste of time. We'll break him another way." Alara paid him no mind. Her eyes were fixed on the man inside the cube. She didn't see an asset or a target. She saw a text waiting to be read. Her movements were economical, devoid of wasted energy. She walked to the observation desk, pulled up a simple chair, and opened her notebook. The crisp, clean sound of paper turning was an alien noise in this digital tomb. "Can you pipe the audio directly to my headset, please?" she asked the air, her voice calm and even. The board guard gestured to a set of headphones on the console, which Alara put on. For an hour, she just listened. The asset, perhaps sensing a shift in the room's dynamic, began to speak. It was more of a whisper, a dry, rasping sound like leaves skittering across pavement. The sounds were guttural, filled with clicks and soft, elongated vowels that seemed to have no root in any known language family. The agency's supercomputers, housed in a chilled basement 3 floors below, whirred uselessly. Thorne paced, his frustration mounting. He saw an old woman, a relic from a bygone era of Cold War spycraft, scribbling nonsense in a notebook with an archaic ink pen. He saw a bottleneck, a failure of the system he put his faith in. "Anything?" he snapped, his voice sharp over the intercom. "Or are you just enjoying the story?" Alara didn't flinch. She held up a single placating hand without looking at him. Her focus was absolute. She wasn't just hearing the words, she was hearing the rhythm, the cadence, the spaces between the words. She heard the ghost of a grammar, the echo of a syntax that was deliberately broken. It wasn't a language meant for communication. It was a language meant for concealment. Her pen began to move, not in flowing script, but in short, sharp symbols. She wasn't transcribing, she was deconstructing. She drew small diagrams, connecting phonetic sounds to potential root concepts. It was a process more akin to mathematics than linguistics. Davies watched, mesmerized. "Sir," he whispered to Thorne, "look at her notes. That's not a language. It's a key." Thorne glanced at the monitor displaying a camera feed of her notebook. It was gibberish. "It's a waste of our time," he seethed. He slammed his hand on the intercom button again. "All right, that's enough. We're done here. Your time is up, ma'am. We'll take it from here." Alara continued to write for another 10 seconds, finishing a complex equation of symbols. She then calmly closed her notebook, the soft thud of the leather cover a final defiant sound. She stood, her expression unreadable. "The language is a synthetic construct," she said, her voice now amplified through the room's speakers. "A ghost tongue, specifically the Kestrel dialect. It was designed to be spoken, but never understood by an outside listener. It has no written form." Thorne laughed, a short, bitter bark. "A ghost tongue? What, did you find that in one of your fantasy novels? There's no such thing." "There is," Alara said simply. "It was created by a network that no longer exists. A network that believed code could be hidden in plain sight, within the very fabric of human speech." "This is ridiculous," Thorne declared, turning to the guard. "Get her out of here, now. Her clearance is revoked for this sector." The guard, a large man who had been still as a statue, moved toward her. Alara showed no fear, no anger. There was only a quiet, profound disappointment in her eyes, the look of a master craftsman watching a child break a priceless instrument. She took a step back, and as the guard took her arm, she stumbled slightly, placing her other hand on the edge of the steel console to steady herself. The movement was small, almost insignificant, but it caused the cuff of her cardigan and the blouse beneath it to ride up her forearm by a few inches. It was then that the main door to the observation chamber hissed open again. This time it wasn't a guard. It was Director Valerius, the head of the prism itself. He was a man who carried the weight of decades of secrets in the stoop of his shoulders, his face a roadmap of impossible choices. He rarely visited the interrogation floors. His presence meant the situation had escalated to the highest level. Thorne and Davies immediately snapped to attention. "Director," Thorne began, "we have the situation under—" Valerius wasn't looking at him. He wasn't looking at the asset in the glass box. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, were fixed on Alara's wrist. He took a step forward, then another, his gaze locked on the small, faded marking that had been revealed on her skin. He froze. The air in the room turned to ice. Thorne and Davies followed his gaze, confused. All they saw was a tattoo, a faint dark blue marking no larger than a coin. It looked like a series of interlocking lines, almost like a stylized chain link interwoven with what might have been a feather or a quill. It was old, the ink blurred by time. To them it was nothing. A youthful mistake, a meaningless doodle. But Valerius saw something else entirely. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, drained of all color. The blood left his cheeks, and his hand, which had been reaching for his tablet, fell to his side. He looked from the faint tattoo to Alara's face, and a flicker of something ancient, disbelief, awe, and a deep, forgotten fear passed through his eyes. The guard, confused by the director's sudden paralysis, still held Alara's arm. Valerius's voice, when it came, was a choked whisper, a sound no one in that room had ever heard him make. It cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "Let her go." The guard released Alara's arm as if it were red-hot iron. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous and absolute. The crushing pressure of Thorne's authority evaporated, replaced by the heavy, silent gravity of the director himself. Thorne and Davies stood frozen, caught in the crossfire of a conversation that had begun 30 years before they were born. Valerius took another step closer, his eyes never leaving the cipher on Alara's wrist. "Ariadne?" he breathed, the name a ghost on his lips. It was a call sign, a word from a dead language, a key to a locked room in his own memory. Alara met his gaze. For the first time since she had entered the chamber, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. A deep, weary recognition. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Janus," she replied, her voice low and even, yet carrying the weight of their shared, buried world. The call signs hung in the air, meaningless to Thorne and Davies. But to the two figures at the center of the room, they were everything. Janus, the two-faced god of doorways and transitions. Ariadne, the keeper of the thread, the one who could navigate the labyrinth and lead others out of the darkness. "I thought you were dead," Valerius said, his voice regaining some of its strength, but now laced with a reverence that stunned his subordinates. "After Berlin, after the network collapsed, the manifest listed you as compromised and retired." "Retired was the official term," Alara corrected gently. "The unofficial one was erased. I became a ghost. It was safer that way, for everyone." Valerius gestured dismissively at Thorne and Davies, not even gracing them with a look. "Leave us," he commanded. "Seal the chamber. No one enters. No one listens. What is said in this room now falls under Cadina's protocol. Acknowledge." Thorne, his face a mask of confusion and humiliation, could only stammer, "Director, Cadina's protocol hasn't been active since the 90s. Most of the files are sealed even from your office." "I am aware of what I said, Agent Thorne," Valerius snapped, his voice like cracking ice. "Acknowledge and leave." "Yes, sir," Thorne and Davies said in unison. They practically fled the room, the heavy door hissing shut behind them, leaving Alara and Valerius alone in the silent, dark antechamber, separated from the asset by the wall of glass. Valerius finally turned his full attention to her. "The Kestrel dialect," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You created it for Operation Winter Song. It was designed for a single field agent and his handler, a two-person linguistic world. It was never supposed to be heard again. And yet, here we are," Alara said, her gaze drifting back to the man in the cube. "He's not just speaking it, Janus. He's speaking it with the Ostrov accent, the one we developed for the handler, not the agent." Valerius's face hardened. "The handler was Nikolai. He died in the fire at the safe house. I identified the body myself." "Bodies can be misidentified," Alara said softly. "Memories can be manipulated, but a ghost tongue, that is harder to fake, especially the cadence. Did you hear it? The pause after every third consonant cluster? That was Nikolai's signature, his tell. We could never train it out of him." Valerius closed his eyes, accessing archives in his mind that were far older and more complex than any computer in the prism. He replayed the asset's rasping whispers, but this time he listened through the filter of Alara's knowledge, and he heard it. The subtle rhythmic hesitation, the ghost of a dead man's speech pattern. "My God," he whispered, "if that's Nikolai, what message is he bringing? Why surface now, after 30 years?" "That's what I was trying to decipher before your agent so rudely interrupted," Alara said, a hint of dry wit in her tone. She walked back to the console, her movements now imbued with a newfound authority. She was no longer a visiting archivist. She was the master of this domain. She put the headphones back on. "Pipe the last 10 minutes of audio through again," she commanded the empty room, and the system obeyed instantly. She picked up her fountain pen, its nib hovering over a fresh page in her notebook. As the asset's voice filled her ears, her pen began to dance. The symbols she drew were no longer just phonetic breakdowns. They were intricate, layered. She was weaving together the sounds, the cadence, the context of Operation Winter Song, and the specific accent of the speaker. It was a form of three-dimensional linguistic cryptography, an art form that had been lost when the Cadinus network was dismantled. Cadinus, Latin for chain or link, had been more than a spy network. It was a philosophy. In an age of burgeoning digital technology, its founders believed the ultimate encryption was human. They created weavers, like Ariadne, linguistic geniuses who could craft entire languages, complete with unique grammars and cultural nuances, and embed them in small, isolated cells of agents. A Cadinus code wasn't a string of numbers. It was a conversation, a poem, a story. To break it, you wouldn't need a supercomputer. You'd need to understand the soul of the speaker. It was unbreakable, and for that reason it was deemed too dangerous, too reliant on individuals, and was violently decommissioned. Valerius watched her, his own past rushing back at him. He had been a young field analyst, Janus, a junior member of the team that supported weavers like Ariadne. He saw her not as an old woman, but as she was then, a quiet, fiercely intelligent woman who could build fortresses out of words, a living enigma machine. The cipher on her wrist wasn't just a tattoo, it was the network's sigil, the mark of a weaver. It signified that its bearer didn't just use the codes, she created them. After several minutes of intense scribbling, Alara stopped. She looked up at Valerius, her eyes dark with grim understanding. "It's not a message," she said. "It's a key, a failsafe." She turned her notebook around. On the page was a sequence of numbers and a single, hand-drawn star chart. "He's reciting the activation sequence for Lethe's shadow," she said, naming a ghost protocol so secret that even Valerius had only heard rumors of it. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness in Greek mythology. It was the Cadinus Network's ultimate scorched earth policy. Not a bomb, but a data plague. A linguistic virus designed to infiltrate an enemy's central command and control network and not destroy data, but subtly rewrite it. It would change coordinates by a single digit, alter financial records by a few decimal points, swap names on kill lists. It was designed to sow maximum chaos by making an enemy distrust their own information, to make their entire system forget the truth. It was a weapon of pure, terrifying genius. "That's impossible," Valerius breathed. "Lethe's shadow was tied to our own mainframe. It was dismantled when the network was. The hardware it was stored on was melted down." "They didn't store it on hardware," Alara said, a chilling finality in her voice. "They stored it in him, in Nikolai. The activation sequence, the core algorithm, it was encoded into the Kestrel language and taught to him as a series of children's stories. He was a living hard drive. They didn't just want him to deliver a message. They wanted him to be the message." A cold dread, colder than any he'd felt in his 30 years as director, washed over Valerius. The enemy they had fought in Berlin, the shadowy organization that had ultimately led to Cadinus's downfall, had been playing a much longer game than any of them had realized. They hadn't just defeated the network, they had captured its most dangerous weapon. And now they've sent him here. Valerius finished, the pieces clicking into place. He gets captured, brought to the most secure facility on the continent, and starts speaking a language only our deepest archives would recognize. He's a Trojan horse. He's not trying to get a message out. He's trying to get a signal in. Alara pointed to the star chart she had drawn. "This is the target identifier. And these numbers, this is the countdown. It's not a date. It's a rhythm, based on his heart rate. The protocol activates when he has spoken the final word of the final story and his heart has beaten a precise number of times. It's already begun." Valerius looked at the calm, gaunt man in the glass box. He wasn't a prisoner. He was a time bomb. He turned back to Alara, his expression stripped of all pretense. The director was gone, and only Janus remained. He saw the quiet archivist, the woman his best agent had mocked and dismissed, and understood that she was the only thing standing between the prism and total systemic chaos. She was the only one who had built the labyrinth, and so she was the only one who knew the way out. "Ariadne," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the world, "can you lead us through this maze one more time?" Alara looked from the frightened face of her old colleague to the notebook in her hand, the key to it all. She gave another small, determined nod. "The Weaver remembers her threads," she said. "Get me a direct line to your primary server control, and get me a pot of tea, Earl Grey. It's going to be a long night." The Prism Strategic Operations Center was the agency's brain. A cavernous, 3-story amphitheater, its central feature was a holographic map of the world, shimmering with streams of data. Dozens of analysts, the best and brightest of the new generation, sat at tiered workstations, their faces illuminated by the glow of their screens. It was a symphony of quiet clicks and controlled information. When Director Valerius entered with Alara Vance, the symphony stuttered. All eyes went to the unassuming older woman in the gray cardigan, now walking at the director's side with an air of quiet purpose. Whispers followed them like a ripple in a pond. Behind them, a humbled and pale Agent Thorne and Agent Davies trailed like chastened schoolboys. Valerius led Alara not to a side console, but to the command platform at the very center of the room, a circular dais with direct control over every system in the building. It was a space reserved for the director and his most senior deputies. "Give her the command chair," Valerius ordered the stunned chief analyst. "Full system priority, alpha level clearance. Her voice is now my voice. Her commands are my commands. Is that understood?" A wave of disbelief washed over the room. The chief analyst, a man who juggled global crises before breakfast, could only nod and step aside. Alara sat down, placing her leather notebook beside a state-of-the-art holographic interface. The juxtaposition was startling. The accumulated wisdom of a forgotten age meeting the raw power of the new one. "Patch me into the audio feed from the interrogation cell," Alara said, her voice calm but resonant in the vast room, "and display the primary codebase for the agency's central server on the main screen. I need to see the architecture." The massive holographic display flickered, replacing the world map with billions of lines of glowing green code, the digital DNA of the prism. Thorne, watching from the periphery, felt a fresh wave of shame. He had dismissed her as a relic, and here she was, about to perform open-heart surgery on the most complex intelligence apparatus on the planet. "The Lethes Shadow Protocol isn't a brute force attack," Alara explained to Valerius, though her voice carried across the silent room. "It's a parasite. It won't try to break down the walls. It will look for a door left unlocked. It uses linguistic patterns, not traditional hacking. It will search for security questions, password recovery phrases, system commands that use natural language." As the asset's rasping voice continued to echo in her ears, Alara's eyes scanned the billions of lines of code. Her mind was a unique processor, correlating the spoken ghost tongue with the digital syntax on the screen. "There," she said, pointing a steady finger, "the core memory allocation. The failsafe protocols are protected by a passphrase system from 1998. It was considered revolutionary then. It prompts the user with a line from classic literature and requires the next line in the stanza to grant access." "We still use that," the chief analyst said. "It's buried deep, but it's there. It's considered unbreakable. The database of potential prompts is immense." "Nikolai isn't trying to guess the prompt," Alara said. "He is the prompt. The last story he's telling, it's not a story. It's a sequence of phonetic keys designed to mimic the cadence of the one poem they knew we would use for the final firewall. The one poem the founder of Cadinus and the founder of the enemy network both studied at university." She turned to Valerius. "Do you remember Professor Albright's seminar on the lost poets of the Great War?" Valerius's eyes widened. "Julian Grenfell. Into battle." "Exactly," Alara confirmed. "The failsafe is waiting to hear the first line of the final stanza. Nikolai's story is a phonetic shadow of that line. Once he speaks the last word, the system will recognize it as the prompt, and the Lethes shadow, encoded in his speech's subharmonics, will deliver the response line and unlock the core system. It will then rewrite our archives from the inside out. We'll become blind, deaf, and amnesiac in seconds." A frantic energy filled the room. Analysts began typing furiously, trying to locate and disable the archaic protocol. "You can't," Alara stated, stopping them. "It's woven into the foundation of the server. Shutting it down would cause a catastrophic system failure. We can't close the door. We have to answer the riddle before he does." She closed her eyes, shutting out the multi-billion-dollar technology around her. She focused only on the voice in her ear and the memory of a poem she hadn't read in 40 years. The asset's voice was growing weaker, the rasp more pronounced. He was nearing the end. "The naked earth is warm with spring, and with green grass and bursting trees," he whispered in the ghost tongue. Alara's fingers flew across the keyboard not with code but with words. She was typing into the direct command interface. "Leans to the sun's gaze glorying, and quivers in the sunny breeze." She typed, translating the poem's rhythm and intent back into English. The asset spoke the next line, his breath catching. Alara typed the response, her knuckles white. It was a duel across time, fought with poetry and ghosts. The final line came from the asset, a bare whisper, the last of his energy expended. And life is color and warmth and light, and a striving evermore for these. The room held its breath. The system was now waiting for the final line. If Lethe's shadow delivered it first, they were lost. Alara took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then, with a quiet finality, she typed the last line of the poem. And he is dead who will not fight, and who dies fighting has increase. She hit enter. For a moment nothing happened. The green code on the screen shimmered. Then, a single line appeared at the bottom of the holographic display. Passage secured. Protocol leather suspended. Awaiting command. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. A wave of sound from dozens of analysts who finally allowed themselves to breathe. The asset in the glass box went silent, his task complete, his energy spent. He slumped over unconscious. The time bomb had been defused. In the silence that followed, Agent Thorne walked slowly to the command platform. He stood before Alara, his arrogant posture gone, replaced by a profound and genuine humility. "Ma'am," he began, his voice quiet and hoarse, "Ilada, I was arrogant and blind. What you did here, it was beyond anything I've ever seen. We put our faith in machines. We forgot that the most complex systems are human. Thank you." Alara looked up from her chair, her expression not of triumph but of a deep and abiding calm. She gave him a small, forgiving nod. "The best locks are not made of steel, Agent Thorne. They are made of stories. Remember that." 2 days later, Alara was back in her archive. The space was quiet, filled with the scent of old paper and ink. It was her sanctuary. But something had changed. A new ergonomic chair sat before her desk. A state-of-the-art, silent computer terminal was installed next to her stacks of books, a gift from a grateful agency. The door opened, and Director Valerius walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. He placed one on her desk. "Earl Grey." "He's stable," Valerius said. "Nikolai. He's asking for political asylum. It seems his former masters weren't planning on a retirement package for him." "They rarely do," Alara replied, taking a sip of tea. "I came to offer you a new position," Valerius said. "Head of a new department. Interdisciplinary analysis. Your own team, your own budget. A corner office on the top floor." Alara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Janus, but I don't think so. The view is better here. Closer to the roots." Valerius nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. He had expected as much. "I understand," he said, "but your clearance has been permanently elevated. Your designation of Ariadne is hereby reactivated. Not as a field operative, but as a guardian, a consultant. We need someone who remembers the old paths." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "The labyrinth is always there, Ariadne. It's comforting to know the weaver is watching over the threads." When he was gone, Alara sat for a long moment in the quiet of her domain. She was not a hero. She was not a spy. She was a librarian, a keeper of stories. She glanced down at her wrist at the faded blue cipher. For 30 years, it had been a reminder of a life she had been forced to bury, a ghost that haunted her. But now, in the quiet light of her archive, it seemed to glow with a soft, inner luminescence. It was not a brand of shame or a mark of a past failure. It was a symbol of her strength, a quiet testament to the woman who could unravel the most complex of knots, not with force, but with wisdom. And in her world of silence and words, that was a victory more profound than any battle ever won.